Hi, my name is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Stacy Leidwinger, VP of Portfolio Marketing for Secureworks. Stacy, such a pleasure to be with you here today.
Yes, thanks for having me, Shira. I'm excited about today.
Excellent. So, Stacy, everybody's putting pressure on budgets these days, and there's just only so much money to go around for security, for personnel, for all sorts of things within industry. How do you see the pressure affecting cybersecurity budgets just in its sense of itself? Because again, a lot of security places out there. How about cybersecurity?
So I think when it comes to cybersecurity, many experts will say, given macroeconomic conditions, budgets aren't untouched. In fact, over year, budgets still rise. But the challenge with those stats is the risk is increasing significantly. And so, given the pace of risk increasing, the budgets that are being allocated are still insufficient. So, cybersecurity leaders are really challenged on how do they make sure every investment is as smart as possible to ensure they're reducing that overall risk to their business.
That is such an important piece that you just raised. I know I speak to a lot of CISOs, and they're constantly asking for more budget because you really just can't keep up with the security that you need. And sometimes organizations aren't incentivizing either their C-suite or the people in charge to make the decisions on working together to create the proper security posture, have the right security within the organization, as well as keeping the business running. So they struggle completely around the cybersecurity. As you mentioned, they're just not keeping up with the pace of the growth in the areas that they need to in that area. So do you have any ideas how cybersecurity leaders can stretch their budgets to do more or less? Or maybe, to put it in a different way, how to do a whole lot more with a little more?
I love how you put that, Shira, because I don't advise any leader to ever stretch their budget. In fact, one of the challenges I think a lot of leaders look at is year over year, I got an incremental increase. Maybe it's 10%, 12%. And so they look at their budget and go, what more can I do this year? I challenge security leaders because of the pace of change in the attack surface, the way threat actors evolve, the way businesses evolve. Every year, look at your security budget and say, what are the drastic changes I can make? We work with organizations that are looking at their SIM budget, for example, and wondering, is it doing what I need it to do at the rising cost? Are there different things I can do? I've seen organizations take budget from the network and now put some of the defense and prevention around identity or SaaS applications. There's not a one size fits all, but I really advise cybersecurity leaders to stop thinking about stretching or incremental change and instead look at making some big fundamental changes because the landscape, the threat actors, and your business is changing significantly year over year.
That was really well said. And I'll even mention and add to that, the technology is evolving so quickly. So our cybersecurity areas are just needing so many more places to be, let's call it, tightened up. And when you talk about that and the things that you mentioned, what about digital transformation across the organization when it comes to business leaders? How would you say that they can evolve as a company in order to encompass what you're suggesting?
I think this really fundamentally, or leaders and businesses need to understand their attack surface. So have they introduced new things like operational technology or OT, where now you have the mixture of hardware and software, where data is being stored, where threat actors could potentially attack and get into? Looking at the transition of how much of your data has moved into the cloud, and is it workloads into cloud infrastructure or is it in business applications? And when you look at that entire attack surface, one of the greatest challenges for cybersecurity leaders is yes, you need to defend against all of it. And I think that's where so many organizations feel underfunded because the pace of how they're changing their IT, OT landscape is so much faster than they can keep up with given the budgets and constraints they have.
Well, as you put it, look at your attack surface. And I think that's so vast. And know who has access to your data, know where the data sits, know what you have. And I think a lot of organizations struggle with that as well. Can you talk to that point for a moment?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think organizations are most struggling with these days is IT is not always centralized. Someone in marketing can go and get access to a business application and start putting data in it. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of leaders out there, Shira, that say, well, the application's going to take care of security. They're going to alert me if there's a problem. The reality is you still as an organization own the potential risk of your data being leaked. And so for many organizations, it's really trying to identify and centralize. Yes, we want the business to be empowered to bring in the right technology, the right integrations, use the right tools that they need to perform the job effectively, especially with the growth of remote working. But if IT and security aren't working together to understand how the data has moved across those systems and taken ownership in preventing and detecting and responding to potential threats, those are weaknesses. And that's where the threat actors go after.
That is such an important thing you highlighted. Look, it's digital transformation across the organization. Incentivize your people to work together for the greater good and not make them butt heads in terms of, do we need this security? Do I need to update this patching? Well, we can't slow down business. What about the personnel? Look at the people, the process, and the technology. What you're saying resonates to many. So here's another question for you. You talked about going to different areas to trying to get budgets from different places, which I think is excellent idea. And I think some organizations are following that, but hearing your words really strengthens that. What are some other ideas about getting more money from budgets specifically for cybersecurity from an organization? Maybe dealing with the board, maybe dealing with the upper management. What kind of case can you make for them to get a bigger budget?
So I always advise organizations to do three things. Let me tell you the three things and we'll dive into each one quickly. The first is understand the formula. How's your organization thinking about cybersecurity budget? Is it based on your peers? Is it based on IT spend? Really understand the mathematical formula because every organization has one.
Yep.
Secondly, then, it is really understanding what is your security posture and maturity relative to your peers. It's hard to say, but in cybersecurity, cyber attackers are always looking for the most vulnerable. And so if they know they're going to attack healthcare or manufacturing or whomever they're looking at, they're going to go after the easiest target. So in some cases, the cybersecurity plan is to just be more mature than those around you, because that means you're going to be a harder potential victim than others. And so really doing those benchmarkings is really critical. And then the final piece is aligning with the business to understand where the risk is. Has your customer data, like we were talking about, moved into different applications, or is it stored in different workloads? Are you part of a different supply chain? There's a political, economic conditions that threat actors are taking advantage of. And even organizations that maybe aren't part of a political unrise, they might have customers that are in that area, which makes them a potential target. And so organizations need to understand that risk. So I always recommend, if you're looking to get more budget, first, understand the formula. There's always one. Two, make sure you bring the benchmarks around your security posture, maturity relative to your peers. And then finally, understand what is at risk for your business. It might not just be data. It might be that you can't afford an increase in your cyber insurance premiums. Maybe you're losing RFPs because your security posture isn't relative to those. Understanding the value to the business helps you justify the spend you need in order to protect and defend it.
Wow, that's three excellent points you summarized so well. Thank you for that. And I'd like to ask you before we end off here, any points, specific points of a business tip that you'd like to leave our audience with, specifically around cybersecurity from any perspective, just something you see that, you know what, I wish they were doing.
So I will actually give you a story because I love stories. And I was talking to an organization, and what they said is, Stacy, I used to look at my cybersecurity budget in three buckets. I looked at my employees, I looked at services, and I looked at technology. And I thought if I needed to improve something, okay, I'd have to buy the technology. Then I'd have to decide, am I going to hire more people, or am I going to outsource a service to manage that? Really, that is an old way of thinking. There are new solutions like managed detection and response, or MDR, that encompasses all three of those. And so this organization I was talking to said, whenever I learned about and happened to be Secureworks and our MDR offering, I realized that I could take budget from my technology bucket, from my people bucket, and my service bucket, and I would get 24/7 threat monitoring across my entire IT/OT landscape. And I still had funds that I could then go and invest in Zero Trust, which is another big initiative that this organization had. But it wasn't until you realized that I didn't have to think about my budget in these three silos. And there are now solutions that encompass all of them to help better prevent, detect, and respond to their threats. I think that's really the key, is thinking beyond some of this traditional thinking, because the world of cybersecurity and the solutions that are available to leaders are so different than they were 2 years ago and even 5 years ago.
I couldn't agree more. Very well said. Well, Stacy, it was such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks, Shira. This is one of my favorite topics because it's really talking about the value that security can bring. And I think often, people think about security and it's like, oh, I wish I didn't have to put so much money into it. I really think that if you do the right cybersecurity defense, you actually can elevate the potential of your business. More customers are going to want to work with you because you're securing the information. Also, it ensures your employees are protected.
That is so true. You look around it, it's the people, the process, the technology, and the process that you do it, and you look at it from that, it is the glue that holds it together and drives business. So, Stacy, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Shira. Bye-bye.